Hello, my name's Rob and I'm from Team Hope. Over the years, I've been very fortunate to work in careers where I've been able to help people and care for them. I've worked in the justice system, worked in drug rehabilitation and education, doing that in schools and out on the street. I've been a school chaplain, I've been a pastor. To work with people going through hard times can be challenging, difficult and often rewarding. I've seen some sad things, and I've seen some deeply moving times where people's lives have been transformed, moving from desperate to amazing, from hopeless to wonderful. I need to talk to you about a truly sad situation that I was once called into. I won't tell you which agency I was working for, and neither will I tell you the true name of this young boy, or anything that would identify him. Professional ethics demand this. I'll call him Billy, which was not his real name. In fact, I tend to use Billy whenever I'm covering for someone's identity, because I can't remember ever actually working with a Billy. Anyway, I met this Billy when his life was turning out to be a tragic disaster. I think he was around 10 years old at the time. He was angry, violent, a young boy who was continually getting into trouble for outbursts of violence. His father was a repeat petty offender who had run out of bail room and was continually violating his parole. He was doing repeated short-term stints in prison. Pretty sad, really. As I listened to Billy's story, I soon saw how sad and tragic his young life was. As his dad was nearing the end of a sentence, he would promise to take Billy on an outing, things like going fishing, or going to catch a movie, or going to the footy. They were good things, and Billy really looked forward to them with great anticipation. There was just one problem. His father never kept one of those promises. It was heartbreaking. After a weekend when an outing was due, I'd ask Billy how it went, and he'd shrug and to me, Dad was busy. It would come as no surprise that in the days following there would be an outburst of violence and Billy would be in trouble again. And in my state, working in this type of agency, we have a law called mandated notification, where the authorities have to be notified when we have this sort of trouble. After a while, I stopped asking Billy how the outings went. As I spent time working with him, I was hoping to help him find different ways of dealing with his anger. Now, he was not an articulate boy, so I used a technique known as picture counselling. And to do that, we used pictures. And I remember using this kit. It's called Cars Are Us, and it's got a whole range of pictures in it. And what you would do is, as the young person would come in, you'd just withdraw the cards and you'd just heaps of different things and throw them on the table, and you would ask the person that you were counselling questions like, pick out a card that shows me how you're feeling today, and pick out a card that describes what sort of weekend you had. And they would do that, and it would open up into conversation. Why did you pick that card? And it was a way of drawing kids that found it hard to express themselves, be able to get them to say it in ways that meant something to them. So we usually started with those innocuous warm-up icebreaker questions. What's the best card that describes your weekend? What's a card that reminds you of your best friend? That sort of thing. One day I've been working with Billy using this technique, and I asked him, after just quite without breaking stride at all, said, Billy, could you pick out a card that reminds me of your dad? His choice was truly heartbreaking. He picked out this card, and you can see on the wall behind me bigger version of it. You can see that it's a picture of a car on a road that's facing a wall that's the road just runs into the wall, can't go any further. And just to emphasise the road can't go any further, there's barricade signs. And so the car is stopped. You can see the expression on the car is sad. Every picture in this series has a little mascot. You can see the mascot here is just always covered with grief. Initially, I was puzzled as to why Billy had picked this particular card. And he told me. Now, I don't know, I've guessed I've worked with hundreds, maybe even thousands of young boys over the years who've told me and answered questions and that, but I sure remember Billy's answer of why he picked this card. He said to me, I picked this card because it reminds me of my dad, and he's on the other side of that wall, and I just can't get to him. If you look at the mascot, that's the one that Billy was identifying with. He really hurt him, and he never told anybody that he just couldn't get to his dad. There's a barrier there that emphasises, and that's why he picked it. He tried and tried and tried to break through with Dad, but he couldn't get through. So I've never kept count of people I've worked with, but I never forgot Billy and the tragic reason why he picked that card. Thinking about this type of situation leads me to consider an aspect of God's nature that the Bible is very clear about. God is our Father. Now, if you tell someone like Billy that God's his Father, he'll think God is someone you can never get close to, and he always breaks his promises. He would see God as someone you just can't trust. Now, much has been written about the correlation between our earthly father and our perception of God. I wouldn't say there's an indelible link, but I have to admit it does interest me. There does seem to be that correlation. I had a good father. He worked very hard for us and he was very committed to his family. He never told me that he loved me, but I know he did. He was a good guy. He was kind. Yet he was always busy with his work, and on top of that I had 4 brothers and a sister, so time alone with Dad was a rarity. My childhood perception of God was that he was good and kind, but he was way too busy to be interested in someone like me. What about you? Did you have a good father like me? Or was your father someone like Billy's dad? Or someone you just couldn't get on with? Maybe someone who was abrupt, or someone who you often argued with, or someone who hurt you. The Bible is very clear that God is our Father. When Jesus asked him to teach them to pray, the opening line of the prayer that he taught them, known to us as the Lord's Prayer, is, Our Father. God is our Father, and it's much, much deeper than the earthly concept of fatherhood. Firstly, God's fatherhood is unblemished and perfect. And while earthly fatherhood is modelled on this aspect of God's nature, it comes nowhere near the depth and the reality of God's fatherhood relationship with us. Neither is the reality of God's fatherhood restricted to earthly concepts of gender. You know, you can't say God's a bloke. He's a great guy. You might be interested to know that the Bible refers to the church in the feminine, and the maternal aspects of God's nature are reflected in the attributes of the Holy Spirit. This whole issue is bigger than gender. But I'm trying to encourage you to see that God is a beautiful, wonderful Father. And for some of you, you can accept that and understand it quite readily. But for others, it will be hard because fatherhood didn't work out so well for you. I want to encourage you to think beyond the ability of the mortal mind. the way the mortal mind see fatherhood. I want to share a story with you that is probably one of the best ways I've heard to express the fatherhood of God, particularly from the perspective of those who've had it really difficult with their earthly fathers. So let me share this story with you. I've checked it out and I'll be open with you, I can't find a credible source. It's not saying it's not a true story, I just can't validate it. But the story is so meaningful that it speaks for itself. It concerns President Abraham Lincoln. Now, back in the days when Lincoln was president, things were going very poorly for the United States. There was a big issue over slavery. The African American people, which had been kidnapped from their own country, were come across and sold as slaves in the United States, and President Lincoln was absolutely opposed to it. The northern states where he was from were very much against it. The southern states, their whole economy rested on slaves. And it got so intense, the Civil War broke out. And a lot of lives were lost. The story I'm telling you concerns an officer in the Northern Army, the Bluecoats they called them, and the Southern Army was the Greycoats. And this officer's home was right near the border of the southern states, and he was away fighting for the freedom of African American people. And while he was away, his family home was broken into, it was burnt to the ground. His wife and children were all killed. He was badly wounded. He came back home to nothing. His life was over. He thought, well, I won a lot of medals in the war. What I might do is I'll get in my dress union with my medals on and I'm going to the White House in Washington and I want to talk to President Lincoln because I need some help. So that is what he did. Showed up at the gates of the White House, looked fairly similar to what it is today with the sweeping lawns in the White House. He marched up to the gate and the guards, of course, stopped him and questioned him. He said that he needed to see the president. And they asked, do you have an appointment? He said, no. And I said, well, even if you got an appointment, you've got to wait months. You can't come in. He told them what it was all about. And they said, sir, you are a military man. You must know we have to follow our orders. We can't let you in. So this man had arrived at the bottom of his life. He went and sat on a bench, park bench nearby, put his head in his hands and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. A young boy, maybe 10, 11, maybe around Billy's age, saw him crying there and came up to him and with the openness that some young children have, he said, why are you crying, mister? And of course the officer, the last thing he wanted was to be bothered by an inquisitive child. He said, please go away. But the little boy didn't go away. He said, tell me why you're crying. He hopped up on the bench next to him and held his hand. Never met the kid. So the officer told him the whole story. Probably wasn't a good story to tell a young boy at that age, but told him how his life was ruined. He couldn't get to see the president. There was nowhere else he could go, no one he could turn to. So the little boy jumped up, pulled the soldier up, dragged him off towards the gate. Well, the soldier thought this is one way to get rid of the kid. If he tries to take me in there, I'm not going to be able to get past the gate. So they get to the gate, and the little boy's holding his hand and leads him straight through the gate, and the guards totally ignored him. Oh. Then they get right up to the main entrance of the White House, and of course that was heavily guarded. Little boy takes them through the middle. Not one soldier challenged them. The soldier could not work out what was going on. Gets to the passages inside, goes down the passage, seemed to know where he's going, gets to what was the Oval Office and knocks on the door. And President Lincoln's raspy voice was heard saying, "Come." So the little boy opened the door and pulled the soldier into the Oval Office. You can imagine the soldier was just aghast. What is going on? So President Lincoln looked up at them, looked at the little boy and said, "Yes, what is it?" This is what the little boy said. "Dad, this man needs your help." The president responded, gave the soldier the help he needed. You see, that's such a powerful picture of our friendship with Jesus. You know, through the mess we've made of things in this world and shortcomings we've had in our life, Jesus actually takes the consequences of our shortcoming into himself on the cross. But when I hear that story, I picture beyond that. I picture the end of time, or beyond time, or outside of time. God sitting on a throne that's inaccessible, too high for us, too holy for us. Though he loves us, there's such a gap between the two of us. And I picture the broken heart. I picture the person who is struggling in life. Is that you? Am I picturing you and Jesus holding your hand and looking up into that high throne that is beyond human comprehension, and you're so hurting you can't even hold your head up? You feel Jesus right next to you, and listen to what he says on your behalf. "Dad, this one needs your help." If you're wishing that someone cared about you, I'm here to tell you that they do. They're here to care about you, and they're here to look after you. That's the picture of this story. But it does portray a reality. In your hour of deep need, Jesus comes alongside you and puts his arm around you. I've felt, it's hard to say, I've felt similar experiences, times when I've really been hurt. But if you're hurting now, I just want to invite you to close your eyes. And you look at the throne of God, and it's so much beyond what you can understand. But if your eyes are closed, I want you to know that Jesus is right next to you, holding your hand. And he looks up into that throne and says, "Dad, this one needs your help." Have a think about these things. My name's Rob, and I'm from Attain.